Je déclare ouvert.
I call to order the second plenary session of the second high-level UN Conference on South-South Cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, the conference is going to continue the general debate under item 8 of the agenda. I would like to kindly remind you, I'd like to remind the participants that the agreed time of 5 minutes has been given for the statements, but a longer version of statements can be published later on the website. Thank you. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Her Excellency rather, Madam Berchel, Deputy Prime Minister for Romania.
Where am I sitting?
No, you're standing right here.
This is not where am I sitting? I'm sitting over here.
No, you're just like, yeah.
Okay. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to express my gratitude for the warm hospitality we found here. And quiero felicitar y agradar.
I would like to congratulate and thank Argentina for the excellent organization of this event.
Say that it's a great joy for me, a great pleasure for me and my delegation to be able to be with you today and to see so many friends in the room. Aligning with the statement presented by the European Union, I would also like to say a few words in my national capacity. The global context evolves in a fast and often in a growing, volatile and unpredictable way. Today's world is more interconnected than ever, and therefore the threats and challenges we face should rally us around collective solutions more often. At home, our actions as political leaders are driven by the responsibility towards our people. At international level, our actions as responsible partners should measure in a greater awareness of regional and global challenges and in strengthening solidarity, especially with the most vulnerable. Working on education for all, ensuring prosperity and well-being of all people is the most efficient way to prevent instability and crisis. It is our responsibility, individually and collectively, to remain responsive and govern for all those who entrusted us with political leadership. When we adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, our shared aspirations were a more even level of development across the globe. The sustainability agenda is about making people's lives better, a decent life for all. We can do this together. I really believe that. What we need is everyone's contribution and the real political will to follow this objective. We must move forward, improve our competitiveness, invest in sustainable growth, and reach the implementation of the Agenda 2030. A special focus should be placed on the youth dimension in the 2030 Agenda and the key role that youth people can play as a more sustainable planet is mainly about their future. In our region, we have learned that we can be stronger if we are united around common challenges, and are better equipped to cope with them if we share more from our experience. A future occasion we have in these endeavors is a regional conference on 2030 Agenda, Partnership for Sustainable Development, organized by my home country, Romania, as current presidency of the EU Council in April 2019, in partnership with the UN Economic Commission for Europe. Countries from our region will have the chance to share common practices and lessons learned in the process of implementation of the 2030 Agenda and in identifying strategic opportunities for addressing key social drivers in our region, as well as looking at areas of sustainability and common interest. In Romania, we have learned and we have even created a new profession, Sustainable Development Expert, to focus exclusively on the specificity of the 2030 Agenda implementation. There will be a team of experts in every public institution tasked with guiding public policy towards achieving the Agenda 2030. It will also focus on the formation of a national network of experts in the field of sustainable development. As an EU member state, Romania is embracing the European Consensus of Development, which proposed a shared vision and framework for development cooperation for the EU and its member states. With our national and regional experience in building sustainable development, we are convinced that South-South and triangular cooperation can contribute to the achievement of global goals, and BAPA+40 provides the opportunity to highlight this objective. Let's take together this message to the SDG Summit, which will take place in New York in autumn, and at the high-level dialogue on financing for sustainable development to make our actions more coherent. And because these two events are held particularly in parallel with the Climate Action Summit, let's seize these opportunities and make 2019 a critical year for the development of the climate action. And I'm very proud that we just recently had a high-level meeting in Romania about the climate change, about the lessons and recommendations that need to be learned in order to address those challenges. Because I do remember that when I had meetings with a lot of my colleagues on climate change, they were telling me that climate change is a matter of survival. It's not just something that we read about, it's actually a matter of survival. Distinguished participants, we run for a non-permanent seat in the UN Security Council elections this June, committed to effective multilateralism with the United Nations and its core. The seriousness of our commitments have been demonstrated over the time throughout our track record within the UN. We hope to convince you once more that Romania has devoted its efforts with commitment and dedication to support the United Nations working for peace and development for all its members. We have always demonstrated respect for our partners, for dialogue and inclusiveness, and I want to reassure you that Romania is committed to working with you all to achieve real, tangible and lasting progress in securing a sustainable future for our children. And I am thanking you all and each of you for listening to me. Thank you. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Her Excellency, the Vice President for Cooperation of Romania. Before giving the floor to the next person, I would like to remind delegations, please, of the agreed time limit of 5 minutes. Thank you very much indeed. I now give the floor to His Excellency Nevin Mimica, Commissioner for International Cooperation and Development of the European Union.
Honorable Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. I would like to thank Argentina for hosting this conference on South-South cooperation and to commend its role in bringing forward this agenda. I would also like to thank the co-facilitators, Uganda and Lithuania, for their hard work on the outcome document, which provides a roadmap for the years to come. With the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the international community gave itself a new framework for international cooperation. BAPA+40 should reflect today's reality and set out how South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation can contribute to achieving our global goals. South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation are both an integral part to international cooperation for development, as recognized in the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. They offer additional opportunities for developing countries, for building new partnerships in support of specific development objectives, and for mobilizing otherwise untapped resources, both in terms of financing and know-how. South-South cooperation has developed enormously, especially in the past decade, both in volume and substance. BAPA+40 is our opportunity to advance the 2030 agenda as our common universal objective. It also embodies multilateralism as a working method. The European Union and its member states believe that we need to harness all types of international cooperation, including South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation, in our efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We have been actively engaged in the process leading up to this conference. Throughout, we have highlighted the need to ground South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation more firmly in the 2030 agenda and to make them as effective as possible. BAPA+40 provides the opportunity to make the contribution of South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation more visible. Monitoring and reporting is important, particularly so that recipient countries have a solid and predictable overview of the means at their disposal for implementing their 2030 agenda strategies. This could be done by quantifying and reporting on the contributions of South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation towards SDG targets and national plans, in line with the 2030 agenda and its indicator framework. The 2030 agenda should guide policy and action in all countries. Our new European Consensus on Development, adopted by EU institutions and all EU member states in 2017, brings this universal agenda into the EU's development cooperation policy. We want to eradicate poverty, tackle discrimination and inequalities, promote sustainable development for all, and leave no one behind. Delivering on the 2030 agenda and our commitment to leave no one behind is the primary focus of our engagement in triangular cooperation. We place particular attention on achieving impact in those developing countries which face the greatest challenges and those who are furthest behind. It is up to those countries to define the support they need and the impact they wish to achieve through triangular cooperation. With these objectives in mind, triangular cooperation allows us to engage in tailored partnerships with countries at different stages of development, to innovate and reflect beyond traditional donor-recipient structures and delivery mechanisms. We see triangular cooperation as essential for bringing together new, additional and diverse sources of innovation and expertise, and for helping all countries to contribute to SDGs according to their capabilities and means, responding to different and challenging contexts. This is essential to address transversal issues that affect all countries, achieving full gender equality and empowering women and girls, tackling climate change through long-term resilience, and bringing in sound public financial management and investments that boost sustainable growth. South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation play an important part in our common endeavor to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. The European Union will continue to work with you all in a spirit of true partnership towards this shared objective. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. Mimica, Commissioner for International Cooperation and Development of the European Union. Thank you very much for your statement. I would once again like to remind delegations of the agreed time limit of 5 minutes. I would now like to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Ernesto Pernia, Secretary of Socio-Economic Planning, National Economic and Development Authority of the Philippines. You have the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, the Philippines aligns with the statement delivered by Palestine on behalf of the G77 and China, by Thailand on behalf of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and by Costa Rica on behalf of the like-minded group of countries, supporters of middle-income countries. 4 decades ago, our countries gathered here in this storied and beautiful city of Buenos Aires to affirm the value of mutual help and self-reliance. It was an outstanding triumph of solidarity over self-interest in an environment that is rife with ideological conflict. Today, we look back to celebrate our successes, and even as we set a new direction for our South-South cooperation. For over 5 decades, we in ASEAN have internalized a habit of cooperation in practically all areas of human endeavor. We have learned and continue to learn from each other in support of our respective national development goals. In 2017, we marked ASEAN's golden anniversary, which the Philippines was honored to lead. It was a celebration of ASEAN's role as a veritable hub for all kinds of cooperation, South-South, triangular, and North-South. Cooperation has given us decades of unprecedented peace and stability, the preconditions for Asia's impressive emergence as the global engine for economic growth. From a least developing country 40 years ago, soon graduating to an upper middle income country, the Philippines takes pride in major strides it has made to improve the quality of life of its people, in line with the UN 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. We rank 8th, or number 8, in the global ranking of gender equality. We have recently enacted a universal healthcare law that ensures equitable access to healthcare goods and services for all Filipinos. And we have achieved a historic milestone in our enduring quest for peace and national unity with the ratification of a law giving genuine political autonomy to Muslim Filipinos and indigenous cultural minorities in the southern part of our country. As a middle-income country, the Philippines assumes its twin responsibility of using resources wisely to sustain its high growth trajectory, while at the same time dedicating efforts to help less developed countries in their own journey to progress. We have thus given and will continue to provide assistance to our friends in ASEAN and the larger Asia-Pacific region. Moving forward, we will also enhance our engagement in Latin America and Africa, as much as resources allow. Through the Technical Cooperation Council of the Philippines and other government agencies, we will share our know-how and best practices in agriculture, science and technology, education, micro, small, and medium enterprises, climate change mitigation and adaptation, and disaster risk reduction. The ultimate objective is to help improve lives through capacity building projects, addressing issues ranging from livelihood to industry level deficiencies. The Global South has indeed much to be proud of. Many have moved up the income ladder, lifting millions of people out of poverty. But it is also abundantly clear that many have been left behind, even in countries that have successfully transitioned from the low-income ranks. The impact of development can never be optimized if vast inequalities persist within and between states. This is especially true in the face of rapid and disruptive changes brought about by the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Emerging technologies and breakthroughs in such fields as artificial intelligence, robotics, and the Internet of Things are transforming societies in ways that we are still beginning to understand. These changes will be either a boon or a bane, depending on our readiness to adapt. The reality is that many of us have yet to fully take advantage of the opportunities presented by previous revolutions, even as new knowledge and technologies emerge. The gap between haves and have-nots can widen at exponential rate with dire consequences if we do nothing. Excellencies, we have to rededicate ourselves to the principles of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action if we are to give our people a fair chance of enjoying the benefits of unfolding revolution. Let us then work together to build our human capital and institutional capabilities. Let us continue to share knowledge, expertise, and technology, and let us defend the open and rules-based global order that allow us to do all this, from which we will all benefit. Thank you.
Je remercie.
I would like to thank His Excellency, Mr. Ernesto Pernia, Secretary of Socio-Economic Planning, National Economic and Development Authority of the Philippines, for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Elmar Maharam Oglu Mamadyarov, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Azerbaijan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, at the outset, I would like to thank the government and the people of Argentina as a host country for warmly receiving us here in Buenos Aires, a lovely city. I would also like to express gratitude to the President of the General Assembly, the President of the High-Level Committee of South-South Cooperation, the co-facilitators, and all delegations for their outstanding support in this process. We are gathered here to commemorate a historical event in South-South cooperation. The United Nations Conference on Technical Cooperation among Developing Countries, held in this city in 1978, was a major landmark in the continuing efforts of the United Nations to promote economic and technical cooperation among developing states. Today is an occasion to reaffirm the continued relevance of South-South cooperation to build a more equitable global partnership for development and peace. As we all quite well aware, South-South cooperation is an expression of South-South solidarity that had proven its relevance by rapid growth. It is a rising and dynamic phenomenon an important process that is vital to confront the challenges faced by the developing countries, making an increasingly important contribution to their development. In the light of the processes of globalization and deepening interdependence among economies, strengthening of South-South cooperation has become a major imperative, both as a development strategy and as a means for ensuring that developing countries participate fully in international economic relations, which is a key objective of the United Nations. It is important to note that South-South cooperation is solidarity and promotion of two-way learning and cooperation based on true partnership for mutual development. Global partnership, as agreed in Goal 17, will be crucial for meeting the challenges of developing states. The construction of South-South and Triangle cooperation requires that developing countries have the policy space for their own development. It is clear understanding that South-South cooperation can complement North-South cooperation, but cannot substitute North-South cooperation. In this regard, we welcome the emergence of new donor countries and the increasing role they play in the South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation, as well as in the fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals. The 2030 Agenda speaks adequately of the developmental aspirations of the South. Accordingly, to the scopes of the South-South cooperation in recent years has expanded well beyond technical cooperation and exchanges of knowledge to include trade, investment, infrastructure, and connectivity, as well as coordination of policies and development strategies among developing states. South-South learning and policy coordination and the peer-to-peer transfer of expertise and technology are effective ways to accelerate sustainable development. In other words, developing countries face similar development challenges. Therefore, the proximity of experience and methods allows sharing common views on national development strategies and priorities. Azerbaijan's approach to the South-South cooperation has been therefore to share this experience and knowledge in a spirit of solidarity with countries from the South treading similar path of socio-economic developments. Drawing of my own country as a landlocked country, we understand the essential role of South-South cooperation to the provisions of collaborative frameworks and cross-border and interregional programs, as well as standards, regulatory arrangements, and implementation mechanisms. Given Azerbaijan's rapid socio-economic growth and achievements, we understand the perspectives of developing countries and share our own development experience through the exchanges of knowledge and best practice. However, Azerbaijan represents a very unique and exceptional example of donor country. We provide international assistance under the circumstances when 20% of my territory of my country has been under the military occupation of neighboring Armenia for over the 2 decades, as a result of which more than 1 million of Azerbaijanis became refugees and IDPs. There are 4 United Nations Security Council resolutions which demand immediate, complete, and unconditional withdrawal of Armenian troops from the occupied territories of Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, occupation is still going on, but Azerbaijan has succeeded in recovering, diversifying, and modernizing its economy while reducing poverty level from 49% to 5%. Most importantly, having effectively integrating both refugees and IDPs into the society, Azerbaijan has accumulated a vast experience in providing them with adequate shelter, health, and education services, employment, while strengthening their human capital, which could serve as a possible areas for the South-South cooperation. National stock-taking exercise on trends and opportunities in advancing South-South and Triangle cooperation in Azerbaijan, conducted by the United Nations Office in Azerbaijan and the UN Office on South-South cooperation in 2016, suggests that Azerbaijan has a comparative advantage in sharing its expertise in various fields of development, such as public service, education, labor and social protection, youth empowerment, and mine action. Azerbaijan International Development Agency, AIDA, established in 2011, is at the forefront to advance Azerbaijan's contribution to South-South cooperation. AIDA uses multiple mechanisms to address poverty eradication and sustainable development in developing countries through building the human and institutional capacity, sharing good practices and experiences in a manner consistent with their national and strategic plans. In conclusion, we believe that strong partnership among countries of the South, supported by developing countries and the UN system, will help unlock the economic potential of the developing countries and benefit the entire international community. This conference will certainly contribute to further strengthening South-South cooperation. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Je remercie.
I would like to thank His Excellency Elmar Mahramoglu Mamadiarov, Minister for Foreign Affairs for Azerbaijan, for his statement. I would now like to give the floor to His Excellency Luis Felipe Lopez Tavares, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Communities and Minister of Defense of Cabo Verde.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. First of all, as a Minister of Foreign Affairs and Defense from Cabo Verde, I would like to express my solidarity with the peoples of Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe because of the natural tragedy that shook them in the last days. And I would like to call all the international community to help those countries at this time of great sadness. Mr. Chair, allow me to thank the government of Argentina and yourself for impeccably hosting the second conference on South-South Conference, which represents an exceptional opportunity to strengthen and further revitalize South-South and also triangular cooperation. I also want to align my statement with the statement delivered by the State of Palestine on behalf of G77 and China. Furthermore, I commend the co-facilitators of this process for their tireless work to make sure that this conference would have an outcome document to adopt. However, we would like to associate ourselves with those who feel that we could have had a more robust outcome without compromising the principles of South-South cooperation or even cherry-picking specific goals of 2030 agenda to detriment of others. Mr. Chair, Cabo Verde strongly support these views that South-South cooperation represents the idea that in the spirit of solidarity, equality, and respect, developing countries can mutually provide solutions to their own problems in an innovative way that has proven to be a valuable tool for building capacity and promoting sustainable development. At the same time, this type of cooperation allows networking between developing countries and their traditional partners inter alia through triangular cooperation, which has the potential to increase the impact of actions and synergies among different development actors. Indeed, triangular cooperation can benefit and enhance South-South cooperation through the provision of inter alia funding, capacity building, technology transfer, as well as other forms of support. In the same vein, South-South cooperation should not be a panacea, nor a substitute of North-South cooperation. Rather, it is a complement of our possibilities, modalities, opportunities, and partnerships at global, regional, and bilateral levels. Therefore, it should not contribute to diminish the responsibility of the developed country in taking the necessary actions, particularly with regard to official development assistance and innovative funding to support developing countries in the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals. Mr. Chair, despite the real potential for spurring foreign direct investment, trade exchange, technology transfer, sharing of solutions and experts, and other forms of exchange, as well as regional integration actions, South-South cooperation contribution extends beyond technical and development cooperations. The contribution of South-South cooperation goes beyond the traditional political, social, cultural, and as well monetary or financial impacts. The above contribution, for example, do not capture the importance of collective interchange that has been fundamental to important political process and that come in the adoption of important multilateral documents related to development. Nor do they capture South-South knowledge and sharing of activities and expertise in ways that are more accessive to the special needs of developing countries. However, the main challenge seems to be how to articulate strategic frameworks that promote South-South and triangular cooperation as modalities that, based on their distinctive characteristics, contribute to the implementation of 2030 Agenda. In that sense, developing countries must take the lead and get assistance to invest in mechanisms, tools, and institutional capacities in a way that can foster opportunities, modalities, and mobilization, aiming at increasing the contribution of South-South and triangular cooperation in the regional integrated development financial network framework. Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, Cabo Verde so far benefited from and contribute to the South-South cooperation, working especially with Portuguese-speaking countries, as well as other non-traditional development partners like China, Cuba, India, Brazil, Arab, South America, and West Africa countries. The adoption in 2017 of the National Plan for Sustainable Development, which provides the country with an integrated vision for its near future, paved the way for strengthening South-South cooperation in a way that it can give its contribution to the implementation of national plan. To conclude, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, Cabo Verde efforts to build capacity to improve results and efficiency in South-South and triangular assume strategic dimension in the national context of sustainable development. For example, new projects with UNDP to promote the role of Cape Verde as an emerging South-South provider establish our leadership in South-South and triangular cooperation within the context of the SDGs implementation. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Son Excellency.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Luis Felipe Lopez Tavares, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Communities and Minister of Defense of Cabo Verde. Thank you, sir, for your statement. Before I give the floor to the next speaker, I would like to remind all speakers of the 5-minute rule, and I invite the following speaker to kindly respect the time assigned. I now give the floor to His Excellency Rodrigo Malmirca Diaz, Minister for Foreign Trade and Investment of Cuba.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Excellencies, my delegation aligns itself with the statement made on behalf of the Group of 77 in China by the representative of the State of Palestine. We have come a long way to get to this conference, 40 years since the approval of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, 19 years since the Action Plan of Havana, and 11 years since the conference in Nairobi, Kenya, just to cite a few outstanding milestones linked to the topic that has brought us together today. South-South cooperation has shown itself to be an effective tool for countries in development to redesign the architecture of international cooperation, as well as to strengthen alliances between nations. At the same time, It has shown paths for the ownership and identification of the needs of countries in development themselves. With the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, a new global agenda to reach them was established. This calls for a redefinition of the scope of international cooperation in its various modalities. Consensus exists about the contribution and the impact of South-South cooperation in complementing the commitments of developed countries with developing countries to build a sustainable society on a worldwide, regional, and national level. Despite the results achieved in the past 40 years, challenges persist. Many of our countries still face severe circumstances of poverty and extreme hunger, weak health conditions, vulnerability before natural disasters, and high indebtedness, amongst other problems. All of this calls for greater responsibility of all, and a call for developed countries to comply with international commitments agreed upon in the Addis Ababa Action Agenda and in the official development assistance. We must also advocate stronger multilateralism, achieve greater involvement of the United Nations system, and comprehensive, harmonious action undertaken by the entire international community. Cuba reaffirms its commitment to the Buenos Aires Plan of Action and the Nairobi Outcome Document, which are still fully current. Even though we are a small developing island state subjected to an economic, trade, and financial blockade imposed by the government of the United States of America, we are determined to continue our tradition and vocation of providing aid and solidarity to the most needy peoples without conditionalities and with full respect for the sovereignty and self-determination of each nation. Even though we have limited material resources, we have implemented cooperation programs in over 150 countries. Hundreds of thousands of health, education, sport, and other professionals have participated in these programs. At present, Cuban health cooperators are providing services in 83 countries. In Cuba, over 70,000 students have graduated, coming from over 100 countries, especially African, Asian, Latin American, and Caribbean countries. Cuba's modest contributions bear witness to the broad possibilities of South-South cooperation. On a national level, we are working on the National Plan for Economic and Social Development until 2030. The strategic axes of our national plan are linked to the actions and tasks provided to comply with the Sustainable Development Goals. This is part of a process of updating our economic and social model, which began in 2011. This includes design concepts which ratify the importance which Cuba gives to cooperation with developing countries. Last February 24, after a far-reaching process of study and popular participation, the people of Cuba approved through a referendum a new constitution confirming Cuba's vocation for solidarity and establishing guidelines in harmony with compliance with the SDGs, such as the provision of greater territorial autonomy and encouragement for local development. In May 2018, Cuba took the pro tempore presidency of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, or CEPAL. As such, we wish to recognize the work done by a regional commission to promote spaces for debate and consideration of our major problems, exchanging experiences, the search for solutions, and ratify the importance which from CEPAL we give to South-South cooperation. To conclude, we wish to thank the government of Argentina for the welcome they have given us as the hosts of this conference. We hope, with optimism, that the results of this event will respond to the needs and challenges of our countries and renew our commitment and that of the international community to consolidate South-South cooperation. We have in our hands the high responsibility of ensuring that experiences on which we exchange during these days will contribute to actions to the benefit of our peoples. As the historic leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro Ruz, said in his statement during the first Summit of the South in Havana, April 14, 2000, everything will depend on us. Thank you very much. I thank His Excellency, Mr. Rodrigo Malmierca Diaz, Minister for Foreign Trade and Foreign Investment of Cuba. I shall now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. David Salkalayani, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Georgia.
Madam President, Excellencies, at the outset, let me extend our heartfelt appreciation for the government of Argentina for hosting this historic event. 40 years after the adoption of the landmark Buenos Aires Plan of Action, the conference gives us an excellent opportunity to review lessons learned and identify new opportunities offered by the South-South and Triangle cooperation for the promotion of sustainable development and implementation of the 2030 Agenda. I would also like to recognize the tireless efforts and the able leadership of the co-facilitators leading the consultations on the outcome document of this conference to be successful end. Dear colleagues, for the recent decades, South-South cooperation has grown dramatically in both volume and geographic reach. This trend reflects increasing importance of this cooperation as one of the effective drivers for change and instrument to contribute to social and economic transformation through sharing experience and knowledge among developing countries. We believe that South-South learning and transfer of expertise can be efficient ways to accelerate sustainable development and to contribute towards attainment of sustainable development goals. In this regard, we appreciate the engagement of the UN system aimed at facilitating the process of this exchange. We also recognize the significant role of partnership with and contribution from diverse stakeholders and centers of excellence established by the countries of the South for further reinvigoration of this endeavor. Against the backdrop of enhanced cooperation, the need for further mobilization of resources becomes more relevant than ever. Utilization of the potential of private sector in this regard gains particular importance. We recognize the need for diverse, innovative solutions for funding development efforts and welcome in this context the expanding dialogue around different models and instruments of innovative financing from multiple players. Madam President, over the past years, we have been actively engaged with a number of countries facing similar challenges by sharing our successful experience in different fields. Areas of interest include, among others, public administration reform, fight against corruption, public service delivery, police reform, elections, creation of favorable environment for business and innovations, taxes and customs. We have been especially active in sharing our success stories in the implementation of the targets related to SDG 16 with particular focus on targets 16.5 and 16.6, as we believe that corruption-free, effective, accountable, and transparent institutes are the key drivers for sustainable development and crucial pillars in the realization of the overarching goal of 2030 Agenda, the eradication of poverty. Fighting corruption in public sector has been one of the fields where we have been actively sharing our experience over the recent years. Currently, Georgia is at the new stage of fight against corruption with the main target to achieve a high level of transparency and accountability to increase access to public information and to enhance involvement of citizens to further improve corruption prevention mechanisms and take advantage of new technologies and innovative approaches in the public governance. Georgia's innovative approach to public service delivery has drawn particular attention. Public service hall that ensure fast, efficient, and comfortable delivery of up to 400 public services under the single roof are frequently visited by delegations of different countries. The Service Lab, a public sector innovations laboratory that serves as an incubator of ideas by researching citizens' need to analyze the most needed services and products, focuses on constant improvement of public service in Georgia. The National Property Registration System has been internationally recognized as fast, transparent, reliable, and citizen-friendly. To harness potential of digital technologies and introduce innovative solutions, Georgia became the first government to use blockchain to provide transparent and secure way of managing property and land rights. This gives unique opportunity to protect landowners from corruptive practices. Government of Georgia has also created innovative approaches by delivering e-monitoring and e-coherence systems that will enable effective and transparent monitoring of implementation of up to 100 targets of nationalized 17 Sustainable Development Goals and integration of the national agenda with the 2030 agenda. The electronic monitoring tools to be launched in coming months will support the distribution of up-to-date information about the performance of public agencies on subsequently all relevant targets of the SDGs, as well as creating instruments for coherent policy making. Madam President, we recognize the significance of platforms like South-South cooperation, and respectively, my country uses the diverse opportunities for sharing its success stories and at the same time to learn from others. Considering our efforts in advancing cooperation with developing countries and countries in transition, supported with the substantial demand from their side in expertise and knowledge accumulated in Georgia, stock-taking of trends and opportunities for South-South and triangular cooperation has been conducted by the regional division of the Office for South-South Cooperation last year. We have been increasingly using also the formats of the relevant UN Regional Economic Commission for sharing practical solutions and lessons learned in the process of implementation internationally agreed development goals. Dear colleagues, notwithstanding the growth in the number of South-South cooperation projects and initiatives, we believe that their true scale, impact, and scope as for sustainable development is still to be further explored. We acknowledge the role the United Nations system can play to further assist developing countries in implementing projects of South-South cooperation. In this regard, we are looking forward to the United Nations system-wide South-South cooperation strategy aimed at further improvement of the coherence and coordination of the UN support to South-South cooperation. In conclusion, let me reiterate our readiness to stay engaged with all interested partners to share good practices on the way to achieving our common goals. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Georgia for his statement. Before proceeding further, I'd like to make an announcement regarding the adjournment of the plenary meeting this afternoon. Due to the long list of speakers inscribed in the general debate yet to be heard, the plenary meeting this afternoon has been extended until 8 p.m. I take the opportunity to remind delegates of the agreed 5-minute time limit. Speakers with longer statements are encouraged to read a shorter statement or shorter version of their text and submit the full-length statement to the Secretariat for posting on the conference website. I now give the floor to His Excellency Miguel Vargas Maldonado, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Dominican Republic.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman of this second UN conference on South-South cooperation. Your Excellencies, Ministers of Foreign Affairs, delegates, allow me at the start, on behalf of the Dominican Republic and of President Danilo Medina, and on my own behalf, to congratulate the government and of President Mauricio Macri and brethren people of Argentina, as well as Secretary General Antonio Guterres and the entire United Nations system for this great event that is being celebrated as we commemorate the 40th anniversary of the adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action. I would also like to convey to you the warm regards of our President, Danilo Medina, to Your Excellencies, heads of state and government of the member states of the United Nations and their delegations, to the intergovernmental organizations, special programs, specialized agencies and funds of the UN system, to the multilateral development banks, and to the civil society organizations, to philanthropic organizations, to groups of experts and representatives of the private sector present here. I would like to wish all of you a very fruitful conference as we strive to achieve the goals that we will be discussing in this extremely important opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, as we celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, an event of extreme importance for the future of cooperation, especially given its links to the Sustainable Development Goals, I would like to share with you some remarks from the perspective of a Caribbean country that has a strong sense of commitment to development, as well as to the creation of global public goods that improve the conditions and quality of life of citizens in general. First of all, the Dominican Republic is attending with particular interest this high-level conference of the United Nations with the hope that the commemoration of these 40 years of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action to promote and implement technical cooperation among developing countries, that this event becomes a new opportunity to strengthen the aims of South-South cooperation that makes it possible to reshape its impacts, not only in bilateral relations, but also in the impact it has on the development of our countries. To achieve this, something we need to take into account is that in 1978, when 138 countries, the signatories, adopted this plan, the United Nations Conference that met precisely here in Buenos Aires worked exclusively with regard to technical cooperation between developing countries and developed countries, distinguishing it from economic cooperation among developing countries, which made it impossible to analyze it as in general, something that we call today South-South cooperation. So that it was in 2003, with Resolution 58/220, that the General Assembly of the United Nations decided to change the name of the high-level committee mandated with this topic into the Technical Commission for Development, rather in charge of technical cooperation for development, into the high-level committee on South-South cooperation, thus bestowing legitimacy to the multilateral concept. Today, it is extremely important to move towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And the current situation is marked by growing influence of developing countries and such actors as local governments, parliaments, academia, the private sector, civil society organizations, and philanthropic organizations. Therefore, the challenges that are faced by states is to ensure the leadership of the operational structures and programs and projects that include the participation of non-state actors in the framework of public-private partnerships aimed at defining specific goals in the framework of Sustainable Development Goals. Now, in the 40 years since 1978, our countries have adopted policies to foster South-South cooperation and achieve an institutional level that has made it possible to create specific normative framework that are envisioned in the 9 goals and 21 recommendations that the Buenos Aires Plan of Action established. With regard to the Dominican Republic, already by 2012, prior to the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals, we adopted Law 0112, which is the National Strategy of Development. This successfully encompasses a vision projected to 2030, similar to the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. In addition to that, we developed and published in 2016 an international cooperation policy for development, which encompasses the promotion and fostering of South-South and triangular cooperation, recognizing the potential that our country has in exchanging capacities and experiences with other similar countries. Also, in 2015, we made available to countries the inventory of international cooperation capacities in the Dominican Republic. This is a compendium that includes some 29 successful practices divided into such areas as institutional strengthening, poverty reduction, protecting the environment, and dealing with natural disasters. Now, developing countries, including the Dominican Republic, with a pronounced deficiency of resources, have embraced South-South cooperation as an operational framework, a tool of foreign policy, and a tool that encompasses development, although there's still challenges that remain before us. The main goal is to identify the challenges and opportunities that this new phase offers us to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and to build an architecture of international cooperation where all countries cooperate based on their potential and competitive advantages, and that where they benefit based on their needs under the principle of leaving no one behind. The Latin American region is a pioneering region in promoting development through South-South cooperation. Between 2006 and 2015, our countries participated in some 7,375 programs, projects, and actions in the framework of South-South cooperation. The holding of this conference here, precisely where 40 years ago we started to strengthen conceptually the notion of technical cooperation among developing countries, gives us a great deal of hope. It opens a possibility of moving towards the creation, if not of a new system of governance, at least of a system that ensures follow-up and strengthens national capacities to tackle the needs of countries based on the implementation of joint development initiatives. Thank you very much.
Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Dominican Republic for his statement. And I now give the floor to His Excellency Nonofo Malefi, Minister for Presidential Affairs, Governance and Public Administration of Botswana.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Argentina, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Madam President of the General Assembly, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm deeply honored to deliver this statement on behalf of the President of the Republic of Botswana, His Excellency Dr. Mokgweetsi Eric Kabetswe Masisi, who is unable to attend this high-level event due to other pressing national commitments. Let me take this opportunity to thank the government and the people of the Argentine Republic for the hospitality accorded to my delegation since we arrived here in Buenos Aires. Mr. President, I wish also to pledge the full support and cooperation of my delegation. We are confident that through your able stewardship, we will have fruitful discussions that will yield tangible results. The theme for this conference, the role of the South-South cooperation and the implementation of 2030 Agenda, Challenges and Opportunities, could not be more fitting. 40 years after the adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action for promoting and implementing technical cooperation among developing countries in this very city in 1978. In 2015, when we collectively adopted the 2030 Agenda for the Sustainable Development, we committed to move towards a sustainable pathway for all, leaving no one behind. 40 years later, Mr. President, studies indicate that so far, notable progress has been made. This should motivate us to maintain the momentum and summon our collective resolve to do more as the countries of the South to ensure that all of us attain the Sustainable Development Goals by the target date of 2030. It is in all our interest to ensure that no country is left behind. This therefore calls for enhanced strategic partnerships with all stakeholders, including the United Nations system, the business community, the non-government organizations, as well as governments. Only then can we ameliorate the lives of the millions of our people from the squalor of poverty, save our planet from degradation, and deliver on peace and prosperity for all, putting the human face to our programs, placing people at the center of our cooperation. One of the major challenges that many of our countries continue to face stems from the limited resources to fund sustainable development initiatives. It is therefore imperative that we find sustainable strategies as well as forge new partnerships to mobilize the much-needed resources from both domestic and external resources. Mr. President, Botswana, as a land-linked developing middle-income country, has made notable strides in advancing her development goals. We thus formulated a South-South and triangular cooperation strategy through which we strive to become a viable state that is conducive for beneficial trade, investment, and economic diversification. It is our belief that for us to succeed in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, we need to enhance and leverage on the global partnerships that also involves the private sector. It is only then that we can achieve our national priorities espoused in our 11th National Development Plan and our National Vision 2036. We believe that working within the framework of the South-South cooperation and bearing in mind all its principles, Botswana has valuable experiences, in particular in areas of good governance and sound macroeconomic policies and many other competencies and capabilities we have developed over the past years. That notwithstanding, we also have a lot to gain from the diversity of our friends in the South, particularly those with common development objectives and facing similar challenges. We believe that innovation, science and technology is critical catalyst to accelerate implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Scaling up investment in this area and enhancing technical and vocational education and training is imperative. We therefore see increasing international cooperation and collaboration on innovation and scientific research, strengthening coherence and synergies among technology transfer initiatives through South-South cooperation as a key enabler in achieving our development objectives. We also note that North-South cooperation will continue to play a pivotal role in complementing South-South cooperation, as it can leverage and mobilize the much-needed additional resources and expertise. Mr. President, we are cognizant of the fact that emerging and new technologies also pose both opportunities and challenges. Therefore, there is a need for countries of the South to be capacitated to deal with associated issues in order to optimize the intended benefits of technological innovations. We need to aggressively move towards the fourth industrial revolution, lest we get left behind. We have to pull ourselves by the bootstrap. Botswana has in this regard prioritized a move towards knowledge-based economy. It is our conviction that a shift from resource-based economy will enhance our drive towards diversifying the economy from the over-reliance on the mineral sector. Mr. President, as countries of the South, we must persist to demand a fair and just international trade regime. We believe that trade remains the engine of growth and development. There is urgent need for rules-based multilateral trading system that takes into account the many challenges faced by developing countries. Africa has over the years strengthened regional cooperation on trade matters through blocks of sub-regional initiatives. But as a continent, Africa has continued to trade at dismally low levels among its member states in comparison to other regions. To this end, Botswana recently signed the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, and we hope that this will alleviate some of the challenges we face as a landlocked developing middle-income country in reaching the wider markets. Mr. President, as I already alluded, mobilization of resources from all sources for enhancing South-South cooperation cannot be overemphasized. To achieve this, we must put in place stringent regulatory frameworks and enabling legislation that ensures effective revenue accountability for every dollar we generate. In this regard, improving the fairness and effectiveness of tax systems, strengthening national regulation and international cooperation to combat illicit financial flows, tax evasion, and corruption. In order to counter such illicit flows, play an important role in filling large financial gaps, in filling large financial gaps in areas crucial to sustainable development. In view of the recent adverse sighting that could endanger our economy, we are seriously looking at additional improvements to existing measures, especially on money laundering and potential link to financial terrorism. We hope that through South-South cooperation, we can benefit from your own experiences. Mr. President, it would be remiss on my part if I conclude my remarks without reference to the need to also address climate change. Beyond peace and security, climate change poses the existential threat to our group of countries, and its adverse impacts will continue to undermine the ability of our countries to achieve sustainable development and could reverse the gains we have made over the years. The recent example of the cyclone that devastated Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe is testimony to these challenges, and we send our condolences to our three neighboring countries on the loss of life and damage to property. For this reason, we welcome the operationalization of the Paris Agreement on climate change through the Katowice rulebook adopted at COP24 in Poland in December 2018. With concerted efforts and political will, we believe that the Paris Agreement can help us tackle some of these vexing challenges. Mr. President, as I conclude, Botswana commends the good work done by the co-facilitators and looks forward to a more fruitful interaction during this conference. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the Minister for Presidential Affairs, Governance and Public Administration of Botswana for his statement. Can I just plead again with delegates to observe the 5-minute time limit? There is an awful lot to say on this subject, but we do need to get through all the speakers. May I now give the floor to His Excellency Manuel José Núñez Jr., Minister of State for Economic and Social Development of Angola. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, On behalf of His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, the President of the Republic of Angola, I extend my warmest greetings and thanks for this invitation by the government of Argentina, and thank them for the warm welcome we have been receiving since our arrival in the city of Buenos Aires. Angola, Mr. President, is a country which is emerging from a protracted and highly destructive war. However, it is a country that has managed to reconcile its children, a country that has established democracy and systematically reinforces democratic life, a nation struggling to achieve high levels of economic growth and to provide its people with progressive levels of quality of life and social well-being. Angola has been establishing relations with neighboring countries and with all countries of the world based on genuine cooperation with advantages for all parties involved. We are living today in a knowledge society where ideas and not objects are the key to success. What makes the difference between countries are factors such as the intelligence of solutions and modern technology based on highly complex scientific knowledge. The challenge facing developing countries like Angola is to make the most of the knowledge of this society so that we can integrate the team of winners of the process of globalization in which we are all taking part. In order to overcome this challenge, Angola has established and will continue to work on relations with the various countries of the world on the basis of reciprocity, mutual advantage, and cooperation in which all parties benefit. We are promoting the transition from an exporting economy of raw extractive resources, particularly oil, to an export economy of derivatives, final and intermediate goods with a high national added value. We do not want a growth model for Angola that is impoverishing, that is a model in which a country is part of the poorest links in the international value chain. For this, we have been investing and will continue to invest much in the development of the human capital of the country, with a view to increasing the productivity of companies and their capacity for innovation, making them increasingly competitive and able to stand together with their counterparts in Africa and around the world. In order to avoid this impoverishing growth, Angola must emerge with structural competitiveness in certain sectors of activity, which presupposes betting on the differentiation and quality of its products and implies the existence of adequate levels of knowledge and qualifications of its human resources. To this end, we have encouraged the establishment of strategic partnership relations between Angolan entrepreneurs and businessmen from other countries of the world possessing know-how and advanced technology, so we can quickly have access to the best the world can provide us in business and technology. We have no doubt that those who are able to take advantage of existing knowledge and technology available in the world will be the winners. Those who do not do so or are unable to do so will be left behind. It was in the 18th century with the Industrial Revolution, and this continues to be the case today. This is why, in Angola, foreign private investment will always be welcome, with a view to contributing to our country not only financial capital, but also the know-how and technology necessary for our growth and development process. We invite businessmen from countries present here to invest in agriculture, agro-industry, transport, the financial sector, health, manufacturing, fisheries, tourism, construction, and all sectors that can contribute to the diversification of the Angolan economy. Angola is a country open to investment in practically all sectors of our society, of our social life. Mr. President, Angola recognizes the importance of South-South cooperation as an important factor in national efforts for the implementation of the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the African Union 2063 agenda. The Angola Development Plan for the period 2018-2022 is the main document for planning and guiding all actions of the Executive of Angola for the aforementioned period. This document contains our strategic development options and the goals to be achieved in the various domains of national life. We consider this conference as a great opportunity to highlight Angola's desire to establish partnerships among our countries with a view to transforming the enormous wealth that is under the soil of Angola into wealth over the land, so that we are no longer a country which is potentially rich and become an effectively rich country, able to give its people the highest standards of living and well-being. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
I thank the Minister of State for Economic and Social Development of Angola for his statement. And I'd now like to give the floor to Her Excellency Diène Keïta, Minister for Cooperation and African Integration of Guinea.
Thank you.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, heads of delegation, honorable guests, it is a great honor for me to convey to the people, to the government, and His Excellency Mr. Mauricio Macri, President of Argentina, and all the eminent delegations present here, the warm greetings and wishes of success to the second UN Conference on South-South Cooperation from His Excellency the President of the Republic of Guinea, Professor Alpha Condé. It would be remiss of me, Mr. President, if I didn't express all the gratitude and thanks to the people and government of Argentina for the warm and friendly welcome, as well as the facilities made available to my delegation since our arrival by the elegant city of Buenos Aires. It is also my duty, Mr. President, to pay a well-earned tribute to His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, for all his efforts and initiatives that he continues to undertake at the head of our common organization. I would also like to express the gratitude of my government for the constant efforts of the Office of the High Representative for the Least Developed Countries, the United Nations Office of South-South Cooperation, and my friend Jorge Chediek, the Executive Secretary of the Group of 77, the UNDP, and the Office of the Special Advisor for Africa, and all their efforts in finding ways of making South-South and triangular cooperation the strategic focus in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Mr. President, the country that I represent is a country that is experiencing a transformation. We're experiencing political, institutional reforms, economic, social reforms, infrastructure reforms, development of energy, rural development, etc. All these reforms are part of our national program of economic and social development. In spite of the terrible ravages caused by the Ebola epidemic between 2014 and 2015, Guinea has recorded since 2011 a robust rate of growth between 6 and 9%, and a single-digit rate of inflation, and a significant improvement in its doing business rating. In continuing the reforms I mentioned, my government would like to strengthen all the innovative partnerships with all the delegations present here, in particular in the sector of mining, agriculture, fisheries, industry, commerce, energy, environment, of course without forgetting education and health care. The Republic of Guinea has made South-South and triangular cooperation a major driver of its international cooperation policy and African integration policy. On this point, We have developed a number of South-South and tripartite cooperation projects at the national level. During the delegation of Guinea proposed creating a capacity-building institute to promote research and development. Mr. President, now as part of the follow-up to the final declaration that our conference will adopt here in Buenos Aires, the Republic of Guinea would like to host a ministerial conference for the LDCs in order to adopt a common platform and a roadmap for LDCs in the context of the 2021-2030 decade to accelerate the implementation of SDGs, the 2030 Agenda, and the 2021-2030 LDC Plan of Action. In spite of the remarkable progress in South-South and triangular cooperation since the adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, it's clear to see that we can do much better. We must welcome all the partnerships that make it possible for us to progress, but no human endeavor is perfect. Allow me, on behalf of the people of my country, Guinea, and my president, to thank all countries from the south and north that have helped improve the standard of living of our people. This historic conference is a great opportunity to give us a new vision and new momentum to South-South and triangular cooperation. To leave no one behind is our central goal, and South-South cooperation is an excellent opportunity to strengthen solidarity among people. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank the Minister for Cooperation and African Integration of Guinea for her statement. And I now give the floor to His Excellency Ulan Chulten, Minister for Food, Agriculture and Light Industry of Mongolia.
Dear Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, and honorable delegates, first of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the government of Argentina for hosting the United Nations Second High-Level Conference on South-South cooperation and welcoming us warmly. I would like to emphasize that South-South cooperation mechanism has made a real contribution in finding solutions to the common challenges and obstacles facing the international community, not to leave anyone behind, and prosperity of developing countries for more than 40 years. I'm very pleased to hear good examples of developing countries that are making steady progress through South-South cooperation in many areas, including sustainable development, environment, climate change, economy, technology transfer, health and social development. Dear Chairman, Mongolia aims to contribute to South-South cooperation in the areas of agriculture, climate change, and support rights of landlocked developing countries. For landlocked small countries like Mongolia, it's especially important to fully implement the goals of sustainable development and consider that partnership and cooperation with South-South will be of great help to maximize the benefits of it. Mongolia has initiated an international research center for landlocked developing countries and has made an effort to fully implement its activities, which is committed to protect the interest and position of landlocked countries in policy making and increase the benefits of international trade for landlocked countries. We truly hope that you will support the work of this research center. It's a great pleasure to highlight that the government of Mongolia has closely worked with government of People's Republic of China and Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations within the framework of South-South cooperation on food safety and improvement of human resource capacity focused on increase of agricultural production and intensive implementation of important national food safety and Mongolian livestock programs. Mongolia is committed to regional integration and development of strategic relations with our two neighbors, and we hold position to observe initiatives of our neighbors with enthusiasm and actively participate in them. I would like to emphasize that Mongolia has initiated Peace and Prosperity Award to support creative works of young diplomats and researchers focused on One Belt and One Road initiative. Dear Chairman, Mongolia is one of the countries where sustainable development goals were set first. Mongolia is committed to reducing all forms of poverty and reach status of middle-income country with ecological equilibrium by 2030. We are in the process of integrating the Sustainable Development Goals into national development policy documents. On the other hand, we are working to identify and approve the national indicators for sustainable development targets based on the implementation of the investment program and multi-stakeholder work plan to ensure financing for development. Many developing countries are experiencing many challenges, such as poverty, lack of financial resources, food safety, and climate change, with a number of challenges strengthening the role of UN development systems in achieving sustainable development goals. Implementation is crucial, and South-South cooperation is crucial in addressing these issues. I hope that this conference will contribute significantly to enhancing participation of southern developing countries in UN activities, supporting cooperation among development countries, improving innovation, technology, information sharing, sharing experience, strengthening partnerships and innovative ways of cooperation. Thank you. And I would like to wish a successful conference it all. Thanks.
Thank you. I would like to thank the Minister for Food, Agriculture and Light Industry of Mongolia for his statement. And I now give the floor to His Excellency Abdul Kalam Abdul Momen, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to convey my government's sincere appreciation to the government of Argentina for hosting this second UN high-level conference on South-South cooperation in this historic city of Buenos Aires, and I thank them for their warm hospitality. My delegation aligns itself with the statement delivered by the State of Palestine as chair of G77. Buenos Aires Plan of Action, or BAPA, was a major milestone in the evolution of South-South and triangular cooperation. Its principles put the SSC on a strong foundation. When I served as the president of the UN High-Level Committee on South-South cooperation in New York, I tried to foster the spirit of BAPA in the work of the committee. This commemorative conference gives us an opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to BAPA and let us carry forward this message through our collective actions. In principle, SSC is aimed at complementing North-South cooperation and not a substitute of it. Yet, in reality, the North-South cooperation has been declining and failing to live up to its promise, while the importance of SSC as an effective form of development cooperation has been growing substantially. In fact, the scope of SSC has expanded from technical fields to economic, social, cultural, technological, environmental, even political domains. There has been substantial contribution from the South in terms of trade, credit, investment, development cooperation, and technological innovations. Currently, South-South accounts for half of the global GDP. Its trade almost doubled, and overall consumption in South by 2025 will exceed $30 trillion. At times, innovations and technology available in the South are more affordable and appropriate to the needs also. Evidently, the South is now poised to redefine international development cooperation structure. We have the confidence that the South SSC would significantly contribute to the implementation of the transformative 2030 agenda and the SDGs. I may recall here that Bangladesh highlighted the importance of SSC in the mobilization of resources, both financing and technology transfer, in context to implementation of the 2030 agenda, even before its adoption in September 2015 at its high-level meeting on South-South and Triangular Cooperation, Financing for Development and Technology Transfer in the South that it hosted in Dhaka, its capital city, in May 2015. Mr. President, South-South and Triangular Cooperation is considered as an important and effective cooperation mechanism in the development trajectory of Bangladesh. Under the leadership of our Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, we are now implementing our National Development Vision 2021 to achieve the status of a middle-income country by 2021, and Vision 2041 aims at transforming the country into a Sonar Bangla, a developed country by 2041. We are in the process of graduation from the LDC category, and we are conscious that this transition would force us to face a new set of challenges as a middle-income country. As we embark on that journey, we wish to harness the potential of SSC to address our huge development needs and challenges. Mr. President, we have included SSC in our national policy for development cooperation. The Access to Information program of Bangladesh is currently leading 3 platform followings SSC approaches to facilitate the exchange of knowledge, experiences, and best practices and find innovative solutions: South-South Network for Public Service Innovation, Alliance for Asian Apprenticeship, and South Asia Civil Registration Network. The UN Global Publication on Best Practices has incorporated 5 innovative development solutions of Bangladesh, which are Union Digital Center, SDG Tracker, Empathy Training, Service Innovation Fund, and the Time Cost Visit model of public service delivery. We have laid out our vision to utilize SSC in implementing SDGs in our publication, South-South Cooperation Financing SDGs, and have shared it with the concerned national and international stakeholders. This publication outlines potential of financing SDGs and in addition highlights 48 successful cases of the South that are adaptable in other southern countries. The UN Office of South-South Cooperation publication of South-South in Action, Citizen-Friendly Public Service Innovation Bangladesh tells our success in ensuring good governance. We are also trying to facilitate matchmaking with other southern partners who excelled in different areas as we put 22 best practices from different countries in a report titled The South-South Matchmaker. Before I conclude, I would like to share with you some of our thoughts and plans to promote South-South cooperation. First, we want to share experiences in various social and economic sectors, such as education, agriculture, public health, and governance, by setting up of a South-South Knowledge and Innovation Center in Bangladesh. Through this center, Bangladesh and other countries would be able to co-create solutions addressing challenges they face in advancing technology transformation, particularly emanating from fourth industrial revolution, share their innovative practices and identify experiences which could be transferred, replicated, and scaled up. Second, there is a lot of potentials in the South-South countries. Unfortunately, these have neither been correctly articulated or explored yet, nor the critical issues of the southern countries are fully evaluated. Therefore, Bangladesh proposes to establish a forum of development, finance, economic, and foreign ministers of the southern countries to discuss, dialogue, and explore the potentials of the southern countries, the critical issues of the South in context to achieving SDGs. Our Honorable Finance Minister sent out letters to his counterparts as early as 2016, and I'm pleased there has been a lot of positive responses. Now, may I ask the membership to establish it quickly? Third, the availability of finance, technology, and support for capacity building would advance SSC manifold. This framework needs to identify the competitive advantages of the global South and harness those to address the common challenges. The development partners, including the UN development system, should provide stronger support to the countries so that they can take the benefits of regional integration being undertaken through different initiatives to accelerate the pace of development in their respective countries. To exchange our views on these and create a momentum in our actions, a forum of relevant ministries or ministers of the South can be created. I'm planning to write letters to the concerned ministers elaborating the purpose, objectives, and scope of the proposed forum. Fourth, the diaspora of the South is expanding in different countries. This diaspora possesses wealth of knowledge and experience, contributing immensely to the development, including the advancement of technology in the host countries. The South-South cooperation should provide them a platform to work closely in their countries of origin and play a more meaningful role in the development of those countries. Mr. President, the foreign policy of Bangladesh is geared to pursue economic diplomacy, and through the framework of South-South and triangular cooperation, we aspire to strengthen strategic partnership with the emerging economies and also with our traditional development partners. I have no doubt that through rock-solid partnership, we are sure to achieve our goals. I thank you. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu.
Thank you. I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh for his statement, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Diego Pari Rodriguez, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the plurinational state of Bolivia.
Señor Presidente,
President of the Second High-Level UN Conference on South-South Cooperation, ministers, delegates of the various countries, as I begin my statement, I convey to all of you, to the peoples and countries gathered here today, the greetings of President Evo Morales Ayma. I wish to thank the government of Argentina for its hospitality in hosting the second high-level UN conference on South-South cooperation. We come to this conference with the purpose of continuing to strengthen our commitments for the effective right to development, as well as sharing best practices of South-South cooperation, finding processes of integration as the ideal space for genuine solidarity, following the principles of respect for sovereignty and self-determination of the peoples, and to promote the goals we share with developing countries. To commit ourselves to South-South cooperation means staking everything on cooperation, solidarity, and economic complementarity. South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation are complementary. They cannot be considered as two opposed models. Triangular cooperation must become an improvement of South-South initiatives by providing financing, creating capacity, and developing technology. It is important that the commitments made in the various fora be met. We remind developed countries of their commitment to contribute 0.7% of their GDP as official development assistance. Our actions directed towards achieving Agenda 2030 must be supported by new solutions to challenges which are responses to the crisis threatening life and disproportionately affecting the life of the population of developing countries. Excellencies, in this short time, I wish to share with you the important achievements of Bolivia in the last decade through the political, economic, and social model born of the experience and life of the indigenous peoples of my country. This model placed Bolivia on the list of countries with the greatest economic growth in Latin America, increasing the GDP by an average of 5% on an annual basis and tripling our GDP in 13 years. In 2005, Bolivia had 38% of extreme poverty. In 2018, this figure has been considerably reduced, ending up at 15% in 2018. According to studies by international organizations, over 2 million people have moved into the middle class. In terms of education, my country has been declared free of illiteracy in 2009. In health, during the present mandate, we began to implement free universal health insurance for the entire Bolivian population. Our vision of development through social inclusion and a dynamic economy has promoted decent work sources. We have the lowest unemployment rate in South America. Because of all of this, my country is convinced that technical cooperation between developing countries plays an important role and is an alternative to support development through the resources and experience of each country under the principle of South-South cooperation. Bolivia is currently undertaking cooperation programs with 7 countries and is implementing over 50 bilateral technical and scientific projects. With triangular projects, we are undertaking 13 projects with various international bodies and organizations. South-South cooperation has made it possible for Bolivia to complement and strengthen its public investment plans with the support of other countries in various sectors of development, such as agriculture, health, education, and others. Peace and international security are important elements to realize the right to development. President Evo Morales has many times stressed the fact that, quote, "There will be no peace in this world without social justice," unquote. Respect for the sovereignty of states and non-interference are indispensable requirements to make progress in South-South cooperation in the context of shared responsibility. In this vein, we condemn the application of unilateral measures, especially economic sanctions, which run counter to the Charter of the United Nations, international law, and the life of free peoples. The commitments our governments made will not be worth the paper they are written on without the political will of everybody and without undertaking specific cooperation actions between our countries. The integration and cooperation of our peoples are indispensable in a globalized world, such as the world of today. We must unite, not divide. We must build bridges, not walls. We must complement each other based on common issues and not those which set us against each other. We must create unity and diversity through South-South cooperation to extend its impact and to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry. I thank His Excellency Diego Paris Rodriguez, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the plurinational state of Bolivia. And avant de donner la parole au prochain ministre.
Before I give the floor to the next speaker, I would like to congratulate French speakers for today's Day of the Francophonie.
Kiwao Ting, Union Minister for International Cooperation of Myanmar.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, at the outset, I would like to express our deep appreciation to the government of Argentina for its warm hospitality and for hosting this important conference. My delegation associates itself with a statement made by the State of Palestine on behalf of the Group of 77 in China, and the statement to be made by Thailand on behalf of ASEAN. Mr. President, 40 years ago, we gathered here in this beautiful city to find ways for fostering self-reliance and economic independence of the countries of the South amid challenges posed by inequitable world economic order. It has resulted in adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, which has served as a guiding framework for promoting technical cooperation among developing countries. Since then, South-South cooperation becomes one of the driving forces contributing to international cooperation. In recent decades, various patterns of South-South cooperation have been transformed into sub-regional, triangular, and interregional levels. 40 years on, the world's political and economic landscape has changed drastically with the mushrooming of regional subgroupings and emergence of many developing countries that have transformed themselves into well-advanced economy. Therefore, South-South cooperation has gained even more increased its relevance as an important instrument for international cooperation for sustainable development. Despite its growing potential, South-South cooperation must remain a complement to and not a substitute for North-South cooperation. Mr. President, today we celebrate the 40th anniversary of the adoption of Buenos Aires Plan of Action. Anniversary always offers us opportunity for reflection. We therefore believe that our gathering today will utilize this opportunity to review and assess progress and make pragmatic recommendations to further strengthen South-South cooperation. Over the years, the main focus of all developing countries has shifted to striving for achievement of our new goalpost, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. As such, no other theme is more relevant than the overarching theme selected for this conference. Mr. President, Myanmar, as a country long deprived of development assistance for the past 2 decades, fully recognizes the important role of South-South cooperation in promoting trade, investment, and development. Most of our trading partners and foreign investments are our neighbors and ASEAN members belonging to the South. ASEAN is a good example of South-South cooperation among 10 diverse countries, which has reached to the stage of a community. Myanmar has also benefited from projects under the Initiative for ASEAN Integration, which is designed to narrow the development gap within the group. We cannot agree more on the salient roles of South-South cooperation in addressing challenges to achieve the goals and targets of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Needless to say, the less developed countries cannot effectively attain the development goals without the sufficient call for continued granting of duty-free access and quota-free market access for all products to all LDC in line with the decisions of the WTO. We also asked our southern partners who are in a position to do so to accord similar access to LDCs. Mr. President, in recent years, Myanmar has undergone rapid political, economic, and social transformation after embarking on its path to a complex democratic transition. In this regard, we have adopted Myanmar's Sustainable Development Plan, which can be seen as our unifying roadmap for our transition. It demonstrates Myanmar's commitment to the realizations of the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs. The MSDP is structured among the 3 pillars and identifies 5 goals. As a country grappling with several decade-long internal conflicts, our first goal focuses on peace and national reconciliation. The second goal is economic stability and strengthen macroeconomic management. The third goal is job creation and private sector growth, held up by the pillar of prosperity and partnership. The third pillar, Peoples and Planet Support Goal 4, which focus on human resources and social development. Taking this opportunity, I would like to thank all partners for their support extended to Myanmar in its endeavors to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Today, aid coordination is a great challenge for us. The government has established Development Assistance Coordination Unit, a high-level platform for coordination, policy development, and strategic decision-making process. We have made a series of reforms to build investment-friendly environment in Myanmar with a view to assisting investors in identifying investment priorities. The government has developed a project bank, a rolling data bank consisting of major projects that have been screened and prioritized for implementations. This project bank is ambitious, is one-stop shop where all information on projects designed to implement Myanmar's Sustainable Development Plan can be accessed with a single click. This innovative arrangement will facilitate in finding ways to working together with Myanmar under South-South cooperation. Mr. President, before concluding, I would like to underscore once again the need for providing assistance and capacity building to developing countries for successful implementations of 2030 Agenda. At the same time, we must also pay due recognition to the premises of state and the government's own identifying the needs and national priorities for provisions of such assistance. May I conclude by pledging to work together with our partners from both North and South to bring about the realizations of the SDGs to make the world an equitable and better place for all the peoples the world over. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank you, His Excellency Kwok Chin, Union Minister for International Cooperation of Myanmar. Before proceeding to the next speaker, I would like to remind delegations of the agreed time of limit of 5 minutes. Speakers will no longer, statements are encouraged to read a shorter version of their text and to submit the full length of their statement to the Secretariat for posting on the conference website. I now give the floor to His Excellency Alamin Wassam May, Minister of Economy, Planning and Regional Development of Cameroon.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, heads of government, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen, heads of delegation. It is a great privilege for me as the personal representative of the President to take the floor, to first of all express sincere gratitude of the Cameroonese delegation to President Mauricio Macri on being elected as president of the second Conference on South-South Cooperation. Of course, it would be remiss of me to express our deep gratitude for the warm hospitality that we've been accorded since our arrival. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the present conference is taking place as we mark the 40th anniversary of the adoption of Buenos Aires Plan of Action for the promotion and implementation of technical cooperation among developing countries. This plan laid the groundwork for the current South-South cooperation framework and makes it possible for us to take stock of the path covered since the first conference that was held in 1978. And to establish a new strategic focus and strategic goals of our cooperation. The topic of this conference puts us at the very heart of the current debate on development. Our discussions and the report from this conference should make it possible for us to strengthen and consolidate the strategic aims of our cooperation, which should aim at exchanging good practices for the eradication of poverty, agricultural development to ensure food security, strengthening resilience to natural disasters, the empowerment of women, good governance, strengthening and intensifying trade, transferring technology on concessional and preferential conditions, deepening financial cooperation, and broad support for science and innovation in order to overcome the digital gap. This forum, of course, does not replace a North-South cooperation or triangular cooperation. It complements it in a useful and timely way. This is why my country supports the initiative of rebooting the United Nations development system by supporting and promoting South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation. This effort today, this meeting, will make it possible for us, I have no doubt, to endow a new impetus to South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation to tackle the new challenges of a world in constant transformation. Mr. President, Sustainable Development Goals are a universal cause aimed at transforming our world. It is more than ever essential to mobilize all our efforts in a massive surge of solidarity to reverse poverty. This meeting makes it possible for us to bring our actions in line with our words. For Cameroon, the 40th anniversary of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action gives us an opportunity to express our attachment to the key partnership with the United Nations Office of South-South Cooperation. It also makes it possible to promote the noble aspirations of developing countries and their determination to strengthen economic cooperation among them. Mr. President, Cameroon would like to underscore its attachment to the main international treaties and agreements that have been concluded in the past few years, including the 2030 Agenda, the Addis Ababa Program of Action, the Sendai Framework for the Reduction of Natural Disasters, and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, of which our country is one of the first signatories. And on this point, my country, since 2009, has put in place a dynamic program of long-term development called Vision 2035, which includes a set of global strategies to put into practice our quest for development. These cover integration and consolidation of the democratic process, promoting the private sector and strengthening transparency and good governance. These play an important role in this program. To achieve the aims sought by countries such as us, I call on the strengthening of South-South and triangular cooperation, in particular in such areas as science, energy, infrastructure, technology, and innovation. My country encourages aligning the trade practices on sustainable development goals in conformity with national plans and priorities. It is more urgent. It is even more urgent if we want to achieve the goals of the 2030 program to mobilize sufficient resources to finance development, given the immense infrastructure needs in our countries. To conclude, while endorsing the statement of the G77, allow me to state that holding the 40th anniversary, or marking the anniversary of South-South cooperation, is truly a historic moment. It is up to us now to make South-South cooperation truly complementary to North-South cooperation. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank you, His Excellency Lamine Osimi May, Minister of Economy, Planning and Regional Development of Cameroon. I now give the floor to His Excellency Pradeep Kumar Gyawali, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nepal.
Mr. President, Excellencies, heads of state, governments and ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, namaskar and good afternoon. It is my honor and privilege to participate in the second high-level UN conference on South-South cooperation in the beautiful city of Buenos Aires, which is witness of the important and historic Buenos Aires Plan of Action adopted here 40 years ago. The BAPA conference in 1978 not only set a bedrock for cooperation among developing countries, but also became a synonymous with South-South cooperation itself. I would like to join the speakers before me in thanking and appreciating the generosity of the government of Argentina for hosting as well as for making excellent arrangements for the conference. We also appreciate the Secretary General of the UN and the UN Office for South-South cooperation for substantive as well as other preparations. I also take this opportunity to congratulate Mr. President and other officials on their appointment to lead this important conference. I would like to assure you and our full support in discharging your important responsibilities. I align my statement with the statement of the Group of 77 and China delivered by the State of Palestine. Mr. President, South-South cooperation is more relevant now than ever before. The development landscape has changed significantly. The South has developed an enormous potential for economic transformation, thus changing the donor-recipient relations between South and North. The progress some members of the South have achieved over the decades has not only widened the scope of the cooperation, but has brought us closer towards realizing the purpose of collective self-reliance. While sharing the experience and best practices between and among the countries of the South will go a long way, the cooperation needs a more concrete and meaningful form. This is time to further diversify and strengthen our cooperation in its scale, in its scope, in quality, and in its effectiveness. South-South cooperation is complementary to and not as a substitute for the North-South cooperation, plays an important role for the effective and timely implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and internationally agreed development outcomes such as IPOA and BPOA. Mr. President, let me highlight what cooperation means to a landlocked LDC like Nepal that has just begun an economic transformation to sustain its successful political gains that culminated in the democratic constitution in 2015. To realize the ambition of the constitution, the government has already initiated transformative process in a holistic approach with the resolve of Prosperous Nepal, Happy Nepali. 41% women representation in the federal, provincial, and local elected bodies, comprehensive social security program, nationwide health insurance program, and Prime Minister Employment Program, among others, are instruments introduced to achieve prosperity and happiness. We have internalized the SDGs in our national policies and planning. We used to graduate from LDC stage at earliest and to become middle-income country by 2030. There is a need of advanced level of investment and to accelerate the growth which demands scaled-up international cooperation. We know that those who have a long journey to travel should walk fast. And we are prepared to walk fast and catch up with the fast-growing economy. But we are not alone in this journey. We are confident that the international cooperation and partnership, including South-South cooperation, are important components in realizing our national development goals and objectives. Mr. President, lastly, allow me now to highlight 4 important principles of our country. First, some members in the South, despite being similar development ambitions, are far lagging behind. They need even more understanding, partnership, and cooperation. Principle of leaving no one behind should be placed at the core. Second, our cooperation should have a clear focus on poverty eradication. SDG 1 is the biggest battle we have and perhaps the most cross-cutting and therefore a sine qua non for making the world a better place to live. Third, gender equality, inclusiveness, concrete steps to mitigate the adverse effects of climate change and the social justice, among others, should be the guidepost of development perspectives. Women and youth should be assured for better opportunities, and more investment must be guaranteed in education and technological innovations. Finally, our development experience tells that all forms of cooperation should respect national ownership and leadership and focus on country needs and priorities. And global peace and stability is the most, because cost of conflicts mainly goes to the shoulder of the global South. To conclude, Mr. President, I reiterate Nepal's call for meeting commitments, forging partnership, increasing cooperation, and redoubling our efforts, including through the South-South cooperation, to support the countries that need the most. Nepal is ready to work together with all fellow member states and all stakeholders to this important end. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Pradeep Kumar Gyawali, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nepal. And I now give the floor to Mrs. Marta Delgado, Vice Minister for Multilateral Affairs and Human Rights of Mexico.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. On behalf of the government of Mexico, I wish to thank the government of Argentina for their generosity and their efforts. And I also wish to thank the Secretariat of the United Nations through the United Nations Office of South-South Cooperation to organize this major event. The commemoration of the 40 years since the Buenos Aires Plan of Action was adopted is, at this moment, a very special point in time when we experience profound changes in the international context. This transformation will have far-ranging implications for the future of our countries and their people. We welcome the initiative to review the progress in the implementation of the South-South Cooperation Agenda, and we challenge ourselves to see the relevance of the adaptations of this agenda in the future for our countries. Since 1979, the South-South Cooperation Agenda has undergone significant positive changes. Firstly, the agenda has become more intense. Multilateral efforts have become institutionalized. They have acquired a dimension of greater prominence, which has had an impact on many of the decisions taken within the United Nations. Second, the South-South Cooperation Agenda has multiplied. The number of stakeholders has increased. National agencies devoted exclusively to South-South cooperation have significantly grown. And today there are agencies devoted to the topic at the sub- and supranational levels, as well as civil and international organizations that are dedicated specifically to the topics of this kind of cooperation. Thirdly, the agenda has qualitatively improved. Today, there is accumulated knowledge and a professionalized knowledge of the issue of cooperation. These techniques have favored a better distribution of material and human resources for development. And lastly, the agenda has changed. Originally, it was circumscribed by the concept of technical cooperation between developing countries, and today the spectrum of cooperation has broadened to include issues such as trade, culture, coordination, and many other aspects enriching South-South cooperation. Despite the major progress, the South-South cooperation agenda not only continues to be timely, its relevance has increased even further in recent years. One of the foundational reasons for the establishment of the agenda in 1980 established that progressive decolonization made us open greater spaces to the less developed world. Today, the participation of countries of the Global South in decision-making in the world still has a long way to go. Likewise, there continues to be a large number of gaps to overcome between countries of the Global South and developed countries. Middle-income countries today have more than 70% of the world's poor. This is something that the South-South cooperation should focus on. We held the initiative of this multilateral meeting as the effort to make the most of the momentum of this progress in cooperation and strengthen its institutionalization and improvement. A demonstration of the multilateral success of this kind of mechanism is a pact for safe, orderly, and regulated migration, which will orient our work towards the countries of the North and Central America for the building of a prosperous and safe region. As the world is, Mexico finds itself in a process of deep transformation. The mandate we received from the president who began his term last December in Mexico is to make decided progress in building a fair, inclusive society and solidarity with nobody left behind and nobody left out. Mexico has a firm conviction that multilateral policy is the space for consensus and coordination of transformative global policy. This space of discussion for the South-South agenda can be the favored space to move forward equity and social inclusion as one of the horizons for global cooperation, which we most long for, especially and retaking the United Nations General Assembly resolution for development measures. We call for this body to take these institutional measures with an inclusive concept of development. It is indispensable for these policies to have at their very core the inclusion of the least favored sectors, as well as adding to measures such as the GDP, and including broader measures for well-being such as happiness and social stability. Mr. President, Mexico comes to this conference in the hope that our initiatives will contribute to the architecture for development. Thank you.
I thank Senora Marta Delgado, Vice Minister for Multilateral Affairs and Human Rights of Mexico. And I now give the floor to Mrs. Jens Frolish Holt, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Norway.
Mr. President, Excellencies, dear friends, to implement the 2030 Agenda and to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, if we are to achieve them, we really need to intensify South-South and triangular cooperation through new global partnerships. The only way to reach the SDGs is by working together. And I would like to extend my gratitude to the UN and to Argentina for organizing this very timely conference. International rules-based cooperation is under pressure. What we need is more cooperation, not less. Isolationism and protectionism do not promote sustainable development. To work together against climate change, to clean our oceans, to give girls the education that they deserve, to provide decent health care and nutrition to growing populations. The list goes on, and I could be telling you about this for hours, but to solve all this, cooperation is our only option. South-South and triangular cooperation in Norwegian development cooperation is led by the Knowledge Bank and NOREC, which is both governmental agencies. The Knowledge Bank coordinates and strengthens technical cooperation and sharing of knowledge in areas where Norway has particular competence. These include fisheries, hydropower and renewable energy, petroleum, and also tax administration. NOREC, which is our agency, serves as a focal point in Norway for cooperation with the UN Office for South-South cooperation, as well as for triangular cooperation under the OECD Global Partnership Initiative. Support for the Technology Bank and international tech cooperation are also important priorities for us. To find the best solutions for the future, we must all contribute to building bridges. Bridges between North and South, rich and poor countries, small and big. As a small country with an independent voice, Norway has a tradition to contribute to durable solutions and cooperating with other member states, regardless of size and location. Norway aims at being a consistent, constructive and active member of the UN. We are the 7th largest contributor to the UN system. We have allocated 1% of our gross national income to official development assistance during many years. We do have a small states perspective, promoting multilateralism and a rules-based international order. And when international cooperation is under pressure, we, as consistent supporters of the system that has served us all well, we need to work harder. We really want to build on years of experience from peace and reconciliation, an effort that we've had on many different continents, and are also a tradition of working to promote international law, humanitarian law, and respect for human rights. We are very mindful that South-South and triangular cooperation have played important roles in peace processes. The Philippines and Colombia have exchanged experiences. Cuba and Norway have worked together as facilitators for the peace process in Colombia. In Africa, IGAD, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, has played an important role supporting the peace process in South Sudan. South Africa has served as a model for reconciliation for the whole world. Norway is aspiring for a seat in the Security Council for the period 21 to 22. If elected, we will look closer into how South-South and triangular cooperation could be developed further as an important tool for security and sustainable development. Norway remains a committed partner to facilitating South-South and trilateral and triangular cooperation, and I thank you for the attention. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Jens Frolish Holt, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Norway, and I now give the floor to Mr. Jairo Estrada, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Guatemala, also on behalf of the countries of the Central American region.
Mr. President, it's a great pleasure for me to take part in this high-level conference of the United Nations on South-South cooperation. This will further strengthen the framework for South-South cooperation within the international architecture. The preparatory work that was carried out for this meeting included long negotiations and consultations to achieve consensus. And today, finally, we have a document that has revitalized the key concepts that we are discussing. We welcome the topic of the South-South cooperation that brings us together in the city, demonstrating the sustained commitment of developing countries to work together in a spirit of solidarity to benefit our people. Mr. President, Guatemala would like to reiterate its commitment to the guiding principles of South-South cooperation, reaffirming that cooperation among developing countries should be guided by the principles of respect for sovereignty, sovereign equality of states, and non-interference in internal affairs, and the constant search for mutual benefits. In the specific case of Guatemala, the implementation of the National Plan of Development, CATUN, Our Guatemala 2032, is a priority related to the 2030 Agenda, as well as other international instruments. It amounts to an important commitment to achieve sustainable development. In this process, it's important that we're not excluded from cooperation, from association agreements, nor from the international instruments that contain elements of joint financing. Mr. President, Guatemala in 2017-28 led a process that was very important in the Ibero-American context in its capacity as pro tempore secretary of the Ibero-American Conference. And currently in 2019, we're leading a process at the Central American level as a pro tempore chairman of the Central American System of Integration, SICA. In both cases, we managed to articulate joint and robust positions in the area of South-South cooperation, demonstrating that regional forums make it possible to develop mechanisms and initiatives that are coordinated, achieve better practices in cooperation, ensuring mutual understanding, as well as solutions that are adapted to our particular needs. Ladies and gentlemen, Guatemala is working on a process to be able to play the dual role of being both beneficiaries and a source of South-South cooperation. With this goal, we're moving forward in identifying and drawing up an inventory of our experiences in different areas. We are seeking to increase our portfolio of cooperation projects, and we hope that this conference will be a turning point to step up our cooperation among various countries. For our country, it is extremely important to strengthen the mechanisms of transparency and accountability, bearing in mind that public action must always be at the service of the citizenship. This is why we are continuing to fight against corruption by implementing an open and transparent government. For us, it's important that at the international level, the historic principles of South-South cooperation prevail, and that we avoid imposing efficiency criteria on development assistance. These criteria were established in very different cooperation contexts that don't contemplate the true meaning of South-South cooperation and its particular features, and they thus hinder the growth of South-South cooperation. Mr. President, the Republic of Guatemala, in its current capacity as President pro tempore of the System of Central American Integration, SICA, made up of Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, and the Dominican Republic. In that capacity, I have the honor of being the spokesman of a common position of the member states of SICA at the second high-level United Nations Conference on South-South cooperation that brings us together today. The countries members of SICA would like to underscore the important contribution that regional cooperation plays, South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation in implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. For the countries of SICA, intra-regional cooperation is a mode of South-South cooperation that promotes the exchange of best practices to give concrete follow-up to the strategies of development among our countries and strengthen the institutions within our countries. It is an alternative to promoting integration, and it supports the regional agenda and the 5 pillars of work of SICA. These are economic integration, social integration, democratic security, institutional strengthening, prevention and mitigation of natural disasters, and the effects of climate change. However, we would like to reaffirm that these modalities are complementary and do not substitute North-South cooperation. These should be guided by the principles of horizontality, solidarity, joint participation, consensus, equality, mutual responsibility, reciprocity, non-interference, and non-conditionality. In our region, we greatly value the role of official development assistance for the strengthening of national strategies of economic development and the reduction of structural gaps. This is why we observe with great concern the situation of so-called middle-income countries and the consequences of this categorization. And there's a need for measurements that goes beyond exclusively economic criteria provided by GDP or per capita and takes into account other criteria, including the Human Development Index of the United Nations, looking in a responsible way at the multidimensional character of poverty and the vulnerability to effects of climate change. This will be decisive to allow the provision of official development assistance to development as well as access to other sources of financing. We acknowledge that the Sustainable Development Goal number 17 on inclusive partnerships for development encourages us to establish in the framework of regional cooperation, South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation, new partnerships and associations with various actors who offer their skills and experiences. This is why we urge the international community and the development partners present here that in addition to bilateral cooperation, that they take part in promoting regional cooperation initiatives and South-South and triangular cooperation initiatives in a coordinated way. We encourage them to work with members of SICA in deepening integration and regional development. Mr. President, I'd like to express the commitment of the government of the Republic of Guatemala to the success of this conference and continue contributing to this important topic. We will continue working with various national institutions to live up to the commitments we've undertaken. To conclude, I would like to leave you with this thought that is contained in Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Mayas, that all should rise. No one should be left behind, that we should be not one or two of us, but all of us. Let us continue moving forward without leaving anyone behind. Thank you very much.
I thank Mr. Jairo Estrada, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Guatemala, for his statement.